Hi, friends. Welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about a subject that is critically important to living a happy life. And one of those is your health. And it's something that so many of us take for granted. I did that for years, and then I ran dead smack into a health crisis. So, before I get to the tip, let me tell you a little bit about what happened to me in hopes that you can prevent this happening to you. One thing about the body, in that, we don't really think about it a lot. We're just running through life. We are just grabbing any kind of food that we can grab and shoving it into our mouths. And, we don't take a lot of time to get the appropriate rest. We just kind of take it for granted. When I need it, it'll be there. And for the most part, that is true. But what we aren't considering is that your body is a complex organism. Think about the brain that's inside of your head. And if you stop for a second and picture what it looks like, pictures that you've seen of it with all of its caverns and compartments and its vessels, blood vessels. Um, and if you just stop and think about that and think about what it does, it's absolutely miraculous to think that that big blob of flesh does all of that, translates color, um, helps you process your thought, keeps your heart beating, helps you to see this video that you're watching. And so we often take for granted how complex the human organism is. The fact that all the time you've been watching this video, your heart has been beating, it has not missed a beat, and you haven't even had to think about it. Very complex. Your hair grows out of your follicles at a certain rate. You don't think about that, except for the fact that it breaks if you get too stressed. Um, or if you don't take care of it, you'll have problems. But generally speaking, you don't think about your hair growing out of your follicles. You don't think about your fingernails growing, any of that. You don't think about your eyeballs and how they're translating color images into something that your brain receives. A language there is being spoken. We never think about any of that. And so for all of that stuff to happen, this thing, this body, requires certain things to make that happen efficiently. And that's just something that we take for granted. Now, the good thing is it makes do with what it's given for as long as it can. And in my case, just running on empty, being stressed all the time, not getting the appropriate rest, not eating when I need to eat, caused me to run into a health crisis simply because my body just ran out of the raw resources that it needed to continue on in good health. And so I'll give you just a brief little snippet about what happened to me. So I worked in the corporate world for over 2 decades, and I was completely mismatched for what I was doing. I was a healer, I was a counselor, I was a guide, I was a spiritualist. I've even been referred to as a mystic. And here I was, dead smack in the middle of corporate America, where it is just cutthroat, and I worked in sales. In many of the positions that I held were sales and sales related. Boy. And it really required me to become something that I wasn't. I was in situations oftentimes where I had to tell a little lie to appease a client, or I had to stretch the truth a little bit. Those things just weren't a part of my nature. We were all scratching to get ahead and scratching to get promoted. And my personality was such that I was way more conciliatory. I cared about people. I cared about my coworkers. I didn't want to compete against them to get a position. And so every day I was just forced to be in this particular situation that wasn't true to who I was. And if you don't listen to my podcast, I have a podcast called Saturday Morning Chats. You can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And I talk about the concept of affinity. I have a couple of podcasts on that. And affinity is so important. In a nutshell, what I mean by affinity is lining your life up with who you are, and that includes your job. So you can go and listen to that at another time, but I highly recommend you get familiar with the concept of affinity and start building your life based on that particular principle. So, needless to say, I wasn't in alignment. I wasn't moving in affinity when I was working that job in the corporate world, and I just simply burned out. So, you take the fact that I was mismatched from the very beginning. In other words, every day when I showed up to that job, I was putting on an air. I was becoming something that I wasn't, simply so that I could perform the duties of that job. And I did it pretty well, but it came at a cost because it wasn't natural to me. I hope you get what I'm saying. So that was the first issue. The second issue was back during that time, I simply was a person that believed in driving, pushing, and I'm still that person if I'm not careful. I will go without sleep. I will go without water when I'm committed to a goal. I have an intense capability of focusing. Sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's not so good. When you're focused to the point where you're not getting the proper sleep and you're not taking care of your body and getting the nutrients or taking time to eat, is going to catch up to you. So that's what happened to me. I just simply burned out. And my body said, you know what? I quit. You can continue to do what you want, but I'm going to be over here resting, and I'm going to be over here taking a nap, and I'm going to be over here, just taking it easy. And so what happened is I ended up coming down with this nondescript set of symptoms to where I couldn't really function at a normal capacity at all. I couldn't describe it. I was going to doctor after doctor after doctor. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, but I just wasn't right. I had things from muscle spasms, excruciating muscle spasms, to burning sensations in my body where I felt like someone was actually sticking something hot on my skin. I couldn't digest my food well, just chronic indigestion to the point where I just had belches just rolling out of my body, just on a regular basis. No matter what I ate, I would respond to it. I would go like 4 or 5 days in a row. Whew, I'm getting upset just thinking about it. It was an awful time for me where I just could not sleep. When I tell you can't sleep, I mean just up for days and up for nights. It was just a horrible time. And at that point, cortisol starts kicking in, adrenaline starts kicking in, which further exacerbates your health. I was just in a really, really bad situation that I could not get out of. When I would eat, sometimes my throat would spasm and I would start to choke. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I didn't have chronic fatigue. I know a lot of people had chronic fatigue. I didn't get chronic fatigue, but all those symptoms pretty much rendered me incapacitated. I just wasn't in a really great place. That's the only way I can describe it. And so I have spent the past several years learning about health, learning about the human body, and trying to repair myself. And for the most part, I've done that. I feel pretty good about where I'm at. Am I 100%? I am not. And I would love to do more, but I simply just can't. And so you don't want this to happen to you. One of the pillars to having a satisfying existence is being in complete health. And it's a lot easier to maintain good health than what you might be thinking. Your body only requires a few things. That's the joke. And it will do exactly what it needs to do. It needs the proper fluid intake. Water, crucially important. I make sure I get the required ounces of water per day for me. And that's a tricky balance. You have to find out what is the required number of ounces for you, because if you get too much, you're going to flush out your minerals. So for me, it is anywhere between 64 and I can go on up to 75, maybe even 80 ounces. But I know people that can get by off of 45 or 50 ounces a day. You really have to find out what is appropriate for you. And I will say this, one of the reasons why we are all chronically dehydrated is simply because we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. There's your water intake right there. If you're eating enough fruits and vegetables, you're not going to require 80 ounces of water. So I probably just told on myself a little bit. I don't eat as many raw fruits and vegetables as I should. I rely a lot on greens powders, wheatgrass, spirulina, moringa, chlorella, dried broccoli, dried spinach. I rely a lot on those simply because I do a lot and I just don't have the time to cook vegetables 3 times a day. But it really is something that is good and something that is smart to do. I just don't do it, and so I try to compensate by using the powders instead of just going without the vegetables at all. So don't be like me. If you can eat the required 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables per day, you're probably going to find that you don't need as much water. And if you can't do that, then make sure that you go to the health food store and you get the greens powders, because you need the nutrients that they offer. Something is better than nothing. And then the issue with them not having the water content, because they are powdered, you can just compensate for by drinking ounces of water. You got to get that water in. The second thing that's crucial to health is just getting enough sleep. Just making sure that you cut off your tablets and your phones and that you go to bed at a decent hour. Find out how many hours of sleep you need. For me to be my best, 6 hours is all I need. For some people that can be 8, for some people that can be 9 or 10. You have to find out what is best for you and make sure you commit to that. Okay, we got sleep, we got water. I kind of gave a little sneak peek on the vegetables because that is crucially important. Again, I cheat. It's not the smartest thing to do, and I do try to make sure that I sneak in vegetables here and there. Like if I make a chili, I'm going to dice up some cauliflower and throw it in there. If I make any kind of soup, if I make like a chicken and noodle soup, I'm going to make sure that I'm heavy on the vegetables. I will sneak corn into chili. I will, just anything that I can do to try to get the extra. If I make a pasta, instead of just having cheese and noodles, I'm going to try to sneak in a little kale or a little spinach in that pasta. If I have ravioli, it's going to definitely be a spinach ravioli. Excuse me, if I have pizza, I'm going to make sure that that is a pizza with spinach and mushrooms and tomato. I'm always conscious of the fact that vegetables are kind of really the fertilizer for good health. You got to have them. And so I'm always trying to sneak them in. Like I said, greens powders work for me. If you're really busy, if you can't find the time to boil vegetables all day, get those greens powders. They are not as good, but they are better than nothing. And something else that I do on the weekends is I will put on a pot of kale, or I will roast a big tray of vegetables, and I will eat those kind of as a snack until they run out. Like around Monday or Tuesday, I'm out of those. And so then I'm relying on the greens powders. But I do try to make sure that I get in at least two good healthy servings of vegetables per day at a minimum, and then I use the powders. So you gotta get those greens in, and I'm gonna tell you why at the end. Stress management crucial. You're gonna have to get to a place where you can be okay with life happening just as it is, and that takes work. That is work that I've had to do myself. I was always the person. I was always the I gotta put the fire out person. And now I'm getting a little bit more content to just let life unfold. Something happens, I'm looking around like, well, if they're not panicked, then I'm not gonna panic. Whereas in the past, I was always the first to rush in and solve that issue for everybody. And now I'm just content, like, you know what? Life is just going to flow. People are going to figure it out. Everything is going to be okay. And so I've found that place of peace within. And that has really helped me manage my stress. When you get really stressed, you start depleting your nutrients, your minerals, your calcium, your magnesium, your B vitamins, all those things you start dumping out in your urine as soon as you get stressed. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. All right, so I'm going through my list. We've got water, we've got sleep, we've got vegetables, we've got stress management, and then the last thing that I'm going to throw in is exercise. You have got to move your body. Do I believe that everybody has to be in a gym huffing and puffing and sweating? Not at all. If you can just do some brisk walking around your neighborhood, walking a dog. A lot of people have dogs that they're letting out in the yard, letting back in, and they could be getting in a little bonding time with their pet, as well as moving their body. And here's the things that we don't think about, that your heart is a muscle, and just like any other muscle, it needs to beat faster so that it can build and stay healthy. And we don't think about the heart being a muscle. And so if you're not exercising it, it's going to get weaker. And if it gets weaker, then you're predisposed to things like heart disease or even fatigue. You'll find that if you go up a flight of stairs, and this happened to me before I started committing to regular exercise, I would go up a flight of stairs to sit in the balcony at church, and I would be so winded. And this was when I was probably in my late 30s. I would be so winded by the time I got to my chair, and I thought this isn't normal, simply because I was not exercising. We live in a world now where everybody has an automobile, and it really is just contributing to the just demise of our health as Americans. I used to even ride to the mailbox. Like, I would pull down the driveway, I shouldn't even admit it, and open up the door and get the mail out of the box. Like, you know, I would wait until I was leaving to go, and if I was going to the store or something, I would back down the driveway, open up the car door, and get the mail. Or I would do it on the way in. You know, ridiculous. I've even seen people in my neighborhood. I never did this because I was always afraid I'd break the mirror off my car, but I've even seen people in my neighborhood, because our mailboxes tend to be on the street in the suburbs. They drive up and then they just reach over, open the box, reach in, get the mail out, close the box, let the window up, and then drive into the garage. How sorry is that? Like, we can't even pull the car in the garage, and then just walk down the driveway and get the mail. Like, that's too much. That is really too much. So I now try to take those little opportunities, going to get the mail, running downstairs to grab something. Even housework for me now is a form of light exercise. I'm going to try to find extra ways to move my body. You know, if I have to run across to the other side of the house to grab something, I'm gonna like, okay, let me, run down in the basement and get that, or let me take this back downstairs instead of trying to save trips and things of that nature. Like, I use every opportunity to move my body. And when you think about it, when we were younger, we didn't have these levels of disease because we moved. We played outside as kids. Our parents, our mothers, they hung clothes out on the line. Just remember that. And the shaking of the sheets in the sun. We don't do any of that kind of stuff anymore. All that stuff kind of contributes to our health. You got to get it in. Get a little exercise bike. I got one off of Amazon for like $129. I ride that. I do a little yoga. I try to walk outside in the summer. I'm not really a winter walker when it gets cold, but I do aerobics. I pull up videos on YouTube and find things that I can do just in my home just to keep my body physically active. So that is crucially important. Here's what I want to explain that you may or may not be aware of, because I wasn't aware of this when I first got sick, and I thought, well, no reason I got sick and no reason everybody's getting sick. Your body performs a myriad of complex chemical reactions every single second of every day. The blinking of an eye, the healing of a scratch on your hand or a broken bone, the beating of your heart, the lens in your eyes, how it sees, how you hear, the hair that grows out of your head, detoxifying your blood when you've ingested things that don't belong inside of your body, filtering out things that don't belong in your body. That's the job of your kidneys. All these things are extremely complex, and your body is doing that every single second of every day. You don't have to think about it. Saliva in your mouth is the beginning of the digestion of your food, and it also keeps your teeth lubricated so that they don't crack and dry out. Very, very complex things that are going on that we just never really think about. In order to do all of those functions, it needs things. And those things are the nutrients that come from food. So, vitamin A, for example, is responsible for the processes of your skin, for your eyes, your vision. Your hair requires vitamin A. The B vitamins are there to help your nervous system. Also, B vitamins are crucial for your hair to grow. Do you see where I'm coming from? Calcium is important not just for bones and teeth. Calcium is also important for the electric impulses that control your heart. Your heart contracts and expands, contracts and expands. That is an electric impulse. And I know we don't like to think of ourselves in terms of that, but if something were to happen to someone and their heart stopped beating for a second, they use electricity to start it again. And so we are electric bodies, and calcium and magnesium actually help or control that process. So you get where I'm going with this, right? You need those things. For a long time, when we were here about the 5 food groups when I was a kid, I thought, you can eat a hot dog. If you ate a banana, you'd be in better health, but the hot dog was still good. What I didn't really know is that your body relies on potassium again so that your heart can beat. There are certain things required, like iron, so that your body can produce blood. When it runs out of that stuff, you are in trouble. Now, the beautiful thing about the human body and how intelligent God's design is, it will start to pull and make do with other things. For example, if you run out of magnesium, it'll try to use a little chromium or a little bit of whatever else you got to perform certain processes. But if you run out, you run out, and you are looking at a health crisis, possibly even something worse. So you don't want to do that. You want to get those nutrients. They are critically important to not just good health, but to your body performing its everyday processes. The required things that have to happen so that you can be a human being requires certain raw materials. When you think about it, if you're going to build a house, you can't build a house out of nothing. You have to have certain raw materials, and the body is the same way. So you got to get it. So the tip that I have for today, get a multivitamin. If you can eat the 5 to 7 fruits and vegetables, or even more, or even go vegan, that is a big thing right now. I tend to need a little bit of protein, so I still do eat a little fish and chicken. I do a lot of protein shakes, but if you can get the fruits and vegetables, do that. But if you're like most people and you're busy and you got kids and you got dogs and you got work, get a multivitamin. Again, I always say that taking the time to go through the process of making great healthy food is better for your body. The discipline is better for you overall. But if you can't, for whatever reason, everybody's different. This is a no judgment zone here. If you think that you're just too busy, and I'm one of them, I will grab a powder in a New York minute. And I do take a multivitamin for the days that I miss, that I can't get in my minimum of 2 servings of vegetables every day. So get a good quality multivitamin. They're out there at a variety of price points. I will say this, try not to get a multivitamin with a lot of fillers in it. I just don't think that your body is going to recognize that as well as it would recognize one that was made with whole foods or plant-based. But again, those tend to be a little bit more expensive. If you can't afford that, get whatever one you can afford. Just make sure it doesn't have a lot of artificial colors and things like that in it. Try to get one that is just basic, that at a minimum has 100% of the RDA of all of the vitamins and all of the minerals. You want to make sure it has the iodine. One of the reasons why the breast cancer rates are skyrocketing is because the doctors have told us mistakenly to stop eating salt, and women aren't getting enough iodine. If you don't have iodine, you're going to be predisposed to things like ovarian, breast cancers, even breast cysts, painful breasts. All of that stuff is controlled by iodine. Make sure that your vitamin has that. You want to make sure that your vitamin has some magnesium. Magnesium is the master mineral. It controls so many bodily functions, stress levels, detoxification, heart, sugar control. You want to make sure that your vitamin has some magnesium in it. It does get difficult because magnesium is a chunky mineral, and a lot of the manufacturers don't like to put that in there because it makes the pill so fat. But try to shoot for around 100, 150 if you can get it. If it has more, even better. I will say that I'm not one that believes in getting super, super high quantities of nutrients. I like to stick closer to the RDA, but again, you want to find out what works best for your body. I am so sorry. It's time for lunch. You want to find out what works best for your body, and I'm always want to do a little research because too much vitamin A can be toxic, for example, and you want to know that when you're out shopping and you see something that has like 700 times the RDA for vitamin A, you may want to pass on that. Stick as close as you can to the RDAs for most things, and I think you won't go wrong. That's just the safest way to do it. So in a nutshell, there you have it. You want to make sure that your health is just humming along. You want to make sure that your body is in tip top shape so that it can support you on your journey to do the thing that you've been called to do. And it is a partnership. If you honor it, if you respect it, if you give it what it needs, it is going to return the favor tenfold and higher energy levels. You're going to be able to do more. You're going to be able to go farther. You're not going to have to worry about illness visiting you at your doorstep like it did mine. You're just going to have a happy life.